What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Brandon Coin YouTube channel, and today we're going to talk about powering motherboards. So everybody knows that I recommend using server power supplies for powering your graphics cards, but I don't typically use Pico power supplies, which is the adapter that you plug in a server power supply to go to your 24 pin on your motherboard. 9 times out of 10 on all my rigs, which I'll show you here in a second in my closet. By the way, I'm sorry about all the fan noise. I still don't have my panels up because I'm still adding more cards. That's a whole nother story. But I typically use these Thermaltake 500 watt 80 plus rated white power supplies. I like these because they're about the same cost as buying a Pico adapter, but you can actually run some cards on them. So for example, I have this 500 watt right here, and it's actually running both of these RX 570s. Now these are undervolted. They're only burning about 120-ish watts a piece, so about 240 watts, and that is a split 6+2 line. So that line max is about 300 watts. I really try not to push those lines over 250 watts. Just feeling on them, they're not warm. They've been running in this configuration for a little over a week now. I have run these power supplies a ton. Let's go over to the mining closet and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So if we're looking over here, I actually have a Thermaltake RGB right here. For a little while, you could get the RGB Thermaltake power supplies cheaper than the regular ones. That's not the case anymore, but I am using this power supply to power that graphics card, and I'm using the server power supply to power the rest of them. So that power supply is doing that one graphics card and the motherboard, and that 1200 watt server power supply is powering the rest of those RX 5700s. If we move down here, this one is an octo miner. I'm running the entire thing off of a server power supply because it does not need a 24 pin plug. But if we go down here to this one in the bottom, there's another, that's actually got an EVGA power supply on it, but that ATX power supply is powering the motherboard and one of those graphics cards, and then that server power supply is powering the rest of the graphics cards. So you can kind of see, like, yep, here's another one. And I'm sorry about the cable management. I need to get all this thing cleaned up. Everything's so dirty. But ATX power supply powering the motherboard and one of these graphics cards, and the server power supply powering everything else. And that's how every single one of these is. ATX for the motherboard and one, and then server. That's actually one of the weird server power supplies. You can't get those anymore, and I don't recommend them. I don't like the terminals on the end of them back there. It's like old, like a bolt-on style. Not my favorite, but it does work. And then down there also the same. So I'll jump on the computer and I'll show you like cost-effective wise, or cost reasoning why I do this. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so now we're over on the computer. I wanted to show you guys why I don't particularly use Pico power supplies, and mainly it's like a cost, but also you end up with a little bit of extra headroom. So now a Pico power supply is one of these bad boys. You plug it into your server power supply, and then you can plug in your server power supply into your motherboard, because natively or normally a server power supply can't run a 24 pin plug. So you need one of these bad boys, which is the Pico power supply. These guys are almost 50 bucks. So you can actually get one of those ATX power supplies cheaper, and then you end up with a whole nother power supply with a little bit of extra mining or power supply headroom. So a lot of people are like, why don't you use the ZSX breakout boards? And those are really nice too, the ZSX. We'll search that up. I want to say those things they're at least 50 bucks. So this is what I'm talking about. If you got it with 4 cables, it's $76. I think if you get it with no cables, it's like 50 bucks. So this goes on to the back of your server power supply, and you end up getting a full 24 pin plug, and Molex. You get SATA and an 8 pin, which is a dual 4 pins for your CPU, so you can power a motherboard solely off of a server power supply. Now the issue with that is it's expensive. It is nice and it's trick. It looks really good. It keeps everything flowing. But having an extra power supply in there, in my opinion, beats it every day of the week. So you can get one of these bad boys. I've purchased them 7 times, $37.99. I don't think I've ever had an issue with one of these power supplies. The Thermaltake Smart 500 watt 80 plus rated. It's a white power supply, so it's definitely not the best power supply in the world, but I'd say this is the the cheapest power supply that I do recommend and I do personally use. There are cheaper, and just be very, very careful because a lot of those have a lot of issues. This one's got 15,000 ratings and it's 4.6 star. So I mean that's pretty self-explanatory right there. Now, like I said earlier, biggest advantage to having one of these is the fact that it is cheaper and you can run one or two of the graphics cards depending on what kind of graphics cards you are running. If they're low power cards, you could probably run two of them off of it. If they're high power cards, you could probably run one of them off of it, and that eases some of the stress off of your server power supply. Now, these aren't as efficient as a platinum or a gold power supply because these are a white power supply, but if you're only running one or two graphics cards on it, if anything, I've noticed that taking, one or two cards off of some of those server power supplies have made them run a little bit cooler, and a cooler server power supply is a quieter server power supply. When you start pushing a server power supply up into 60, 70, 80+% range on its power usage, they start to sound like a little jet turbine starting to take off. It's like, you know what I'm saying? So yeah. That's that's pretty much why, how, what, when, where, and like what I recommend and what I also do. Now, am I telling you that you have to do it this way? No, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Some people like to run dual ATX power supplies. Some people like to run all server power supplies. Some people like to run one single big boy ATX power supply. That's probably the most expensive way to do it. This is a way that I've done it, and it's worked out for me, and a lot of people around me have done it, and I mean, it's hard to argue with time and results. So now a question that I do get asked a lot is, how do I run two power supplies at one time? Do I need a special adapter? You can get adapters where it goes from a server to an ATX and it powers them on at the same time, or dual servers or dual ATX. They make all those adapters. Let me tell you, save all your money. Don't worry about any of that. Just always remember, you power up your auxiliary power supply first. And what I mean by auxiliary is the power supply that's not powering the motherboard. Doesn't matter if it's ATX, server, ATX, or any combination. You power up the power supply that's not powering up the motherboard, so that gives power to all the graphics cards first. Then you power up the power supply that's powering your motherboard second. And a lot of people are like, oh my god, what if electricity backflows, blah, blah, blah. It don't work like that. It don't work like that, ladies and gentlemen. So power up all your graphics cards first, and then your motherboard. And if you were trying to power them up at the same exact time and you were having issues with graphics cards not showing up, that's because on a lot of the newer systems, the motherboards post so fast, which is power on self-test, where it looks for all the hardware that's attached to the motherboard, that if those risers didn't get power and the graphics cards didn't get power fast enough from the server power supply, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but when you hit the power button on a server power supply, there's like a split-second delay where, like, on the LCD screen, it's like kind of like it's booting up, and then it's like boom, 12.4, 12.1, 12 point something volts. That little bit of delay, when that motherboard's already, looking for those graphics cards, if it doesn't find those graphics cards when it posts, it won't find the graphics cards after that. Graphics cards are not hot swappable on pretty much all retail and consumer motherboards, so you can't power up something after the motherboard's been powered up. It just won't see it. So if you've ran into those issues where you're running two power supplies and you don't have some graphics cards showing up, before you go changing out risers and cables and giblets and all that kind of stuff, power up your auxiliary power supply, give power to all those graphics cards, or at least the graphics cards that are plugged in to the server power supply or to the auxiliary ATX power supply, then power on your motherboard power supply. And the graphics card that's attached to your motherboard power supply will be getting power as your motherboard's getting power. So like everything will be boom, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, take it home, wrap it up, slap it up, and hit the mines. We'll be making money. You know what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? So, yeah, if you have any questions about that, please comment down below. And then just so I don't feel like I'm a crazy person, because sometimes I tell people I'm running, ATX and server power supplies, and they're like, oh my god, what? But everybody else around me does it, and I've been doing it for years. Comment down below. Are you a dual ATX and server power supply? Let's call it. Are you a combination PSU miner? Do you mix the waters? Do you muddy the waters of the power supplies, or are you a purist? Do you have to keep it all solid ATX or all solid server? Let me know what situation you guys are, and let me know if you've had any bad results. Like, that's one thing I haven't had a bad luck in is power supplies. I've always bought pretty decent power supplies. I wouldn't consider a Thermaltake White a good power supply, but it's definitely not a bad power supply. You just have to know what hardware and know what to expect out of it. You can't buy this 500 watt Thermaltake and go and pull 500 watts from it. It ain't gonna work. You can't even pull 400 watts from this bad boy. I would recommend not pulling realistically over 300 watts from a 500 watt Thermaltake White. Just saying. So if you did the 80% rule, that would put it at 400 watts. But you gotta be easy on these little guys. So okay, I felt like that was a mouthful. I'm sorry if I just unloaded that. I kind of wanted to get all that information out quick. So now you know how I power my motherboards and how I power them in a cost-effective but very utilitarian way. It's not the prettiest, but it works. So there it is. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. I'll see you on the next one. Peace. Oh, by the way, people that have joined the forums, I appreciate you guys jumping over there and bearing with us in the beginning. We're having a little bit of growing pains, but thank you. Now, if you want to join the forums, the link is down below. It's a good little atmosphere if you like being in like forum style stuff. If you don't, that's cool. You don't have to join. But we did Batman, actually. I don't want to say we. Thank you, Batman. He got the uploading pictures situation fixed, so now it's super easy to upload pictures and share them in your posts. So yeah, just a quick little update there. Have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one. For real, this is bye now this time. Later.